exam. It was very helpful for me. The main issue I'd like to share in this session, how to write your competency assessment. What the mean of the competency assessment? When you arrive as a newcomer to Canada and you apply for any engineering bodies, such as APEGA in Edmonton or EGBC in Vancouver or the bioengineering in Ontario, you have to express your engineering experience. But the question, how you should write your experience? How should you present yourself? And what the procedure should you do to ignore any potential interview? Why? Because sometimes if you submit your assessment or your experience and it wasn't sufficient, or they didn't cover all of maybe categories required in the assessment, they maybe the board maybe will refer you for an interview. And because the most engineering bodies in Canada depend on volunteers, so sometimes maybe the time frame between submitting your application and the interview, 6 months, 8 months, it depends. And you have after that to wait after the interview. So when you write your competency assessment and how to explain yourself, but first of all, let's have a look what may be main issue or main topics you have to cover when you write your competency assessment. I shared the screen. I hope everybody can see this screen. This is maybe from 1 to 10. This is the main maybe competency assessment you have maybe to focus in, because most evaluation focus in this assessment. It may be sometimes 30 assessment, but this is the main. It may be, especially it maybe can show your ability, your knowledge for the codes, for the standard, for energy codes, or kind of that. This may be, let's have a look, regulation codes and standard, project and design constraints, risk identification, application of theory, solution techniques, safety awareness, system and their components, project and the process life cycle, quality control, engineering, and documents. Actually, when you write these headlines, and for maybe for the first look, you think about maybe it's different topic, or have you need to find different project? No, maybe you can use the same project to answer for all the questions, but you have to be specific in your answer. In the competency assessment, remember, don't be general. Be specific, be very specific. Try to show your ability to use the codes or the standards. When you write your competency assessment, first of all, try to write a brief description about the job. What the kind of the job? Dimensions. For example, my employer, my company, my firm was hired to construct steel structure, wood, concrete building. Dimensions, let's maybe say 120 feet by 60 and height 10, blah, 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 blah. Steel structure, or maybe concrete or wood, kind of that. That may be just a brief description. And you have to always use I, my responsibility, my category, my conclusion. Always talk about yourself. Don't be general. If you be general, you will lose maybe your score in the competency assessment. So always you have to show your ability, your understanding for the roles, for the codes. And again, after maybe you write maybe brief description about the job, and then send my responsibility, my role was 1, maybe design the foundation, or design the for example the roof or the project according to the code, blah 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 blah. Preparing structural engineering sketches according to the code, blah blah blah. Here, please pay attention. Don't mention for drawings. You prepare drawings in general, because you are engineer or structural or civil. You are not a draftsman. You are not technology draftsman. You have to mention structural sketches or civil sketches. That's what you need for your job. Most of us maybe use AutoCAD, use Revit to maybe show our maybe drawings. That's good, but just remember structural sketches. Okay, and then when you start, maybe after that, explain what you did to express and how to deal with the problem. First of all, what you said I read the contract to understand maybe the requirement or the conditions of the maybe of the client, blah 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 blah. Then second, after that, you have now to be very specific. Okay, according to the code, or for the standard, or maybe for the or maybe recent revision, blah blah blah. You have to mention to the page and what kind of maybe standard you used. For example, in Canada, if you maybe talk about steel structure, now we have standard CSA 1619. Before we have standard CSA 1614. In my assessment, when I submitted that, I mentioned according to CSA 1619. CSA 1614 page blah blah blah. I select maybe this kind of maybe cold form steel. Now, when I'm coming to the foundation, I said according to the maybe CSA 2334, this is the standard for the concrete. I design the foundation as a deep foundation, because in Canada there is two kinds of foundation you have to use, maybe shallow and deep. Deep foundation for most maybe job or building, because Canada is extremely cold weather, especially in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So that maybe you need sometimes the deep foundation for the frost jetting. And also you have to mention just maybe in one line what the equation you used for maybe for your design. Also in one line, two lines, you just mention for the software, if you use maybe software for that, and try also to use something maybe known or maybe public in Canada. If you talk about the wood, maybe you can use maybe Canadian wood sizer software for the wood. Maybe for the high building, for the seismic, you have maybe you can. I use ETABS, I use SAP, StudyPro. It doesn't matter. And then remember, in your competency assessment, it may be just maybe 1,000 for the assessment. For each assessment, maybe you have between 1,000 to maybe 1,000 to 100 or 200 extra. No more you can write. You have to you have to be very descriptive, very direct. Don't be general. Try to be very specific. Now, I'll share an example from the recent assessment I did before to show you maybe a practical example now. Yeah, let's see me this one. Okay, everybody can see my screen? Everyone? Yeah, okay, now this is the competency assessment, and for the APEGA and EGBC in Vancouver, approximately same, because I did the assessment here and here. Okay, now let's take an example here. This is one of the assessment or competency assessment. You have to take about regulations, code, standard, dimensions, knowledge of regulation, code, standard, and safety. This include local engineering procedures and practice application. Let's see now the situation, what I mentioned here. See, a client attachment, you have maybe to attach drawing sometimes, requested my company to design and construct 80 by 140 by 22 steel rigid frame, Alberta. The main floor involved car wash, office, blah, blah. Now, my role was, here you have to be specific. You have to talk about yourself. Design of walls, foundation as per the building code, preparing structural sketches. Now, have a look here. Maybe in this chapter, you just maybe allowed to write 100 or 200 words. Then you have to be direct, specific, very descriptive, and always talk about yourself. See, my role. And here I assign my role. Now, Let's maybe now how I answer this question. See, I read the contract. See what I use. I read the contract to identify usage of the project and classify the building as per building code as F3, because in the code we have some classification, F2, F3, maybe E1, E3. It depends on the building. Okay, if maybe if you have a garage, if you have a house, if you maybe workshop, it depends on the building, on the zone area. You can classify the building, which applies to serve building such as workshop or warehouse. Also, see, I always focus on I identify the snow load as 1.9 kilopascal, as mentioned in Appendix C in Volume 2 of the Alberta Building Code. Then, I designed the footing as continuous concrete strip footing as per now CSA A2314. This is the recent revision. Now there is new one. You have to use CSA A2319. This is a new one, which illustrate how to select shallow or deep foundation. Shallow or deep foundation. I added piles 22 deep. In addition, I considered safety factors. For example, frost jacking, so I add 8 inches wide void form. Also, 10 mil poly dam proofing to prevent moisture in soil from entering the concrete floor through capillary action, because because we in Alberta the weather is very cold, so that maybe the moisture or maybe can push your building up. So we have maybe to add void form and mil poly. I again see what I did. I designed the wall to meet the fire rating requirements. For example, the internal wall which separate between office and workshop must be 1 hour fire rated. Also, I wrote both the walls, assemblies, internal and to identify the materials, insulation, cladding, drywall as per the National Energy Building Code. I could calculate mezzanine. This is very important, as maybe 75 pound by square foot. I design it at maybe 2 by 18.6, maybe to line up with the floor as CSA 16. I discuss my drawing with the other discipline. I use the AutoCAD to prepare the essential sketches. Again, here you are not a draftsman. You have just to mention, you maybe use the AutoCAD or Revit or any kind of the drawing software just for structural sketches or civil sketches, for maybe cross-section, foundation, and detail as per Alberta Building Code, Volume 1. Please see attachment. See now in 1,000 words, we were very descriptive. We maybe used, I show my ability, what I did here, and also I mentioned for the code, maybe and standard in specific. Now, let's say you are a newcomer to Canada and you have to submit your assessment for the first time. You didn't work in Canada. And the first step, when you submit your assessment, you have to do the same procedure, but for your experience out of Canada. Okay, you have to follow for the same rules, but what the code we use before coming to Canada? Around the world, maybe most of us use the ACI code or UBC 97, or if you use some local codes, maybe in India, in Egypt, in Syria, in Malaysia, it doesn't matter. But in my recommendation, try to use maybe something maybe known and international codes, especially in Canada. If you mention for you using maybe ACI as American code, or the UBC 97, or maybe the BS5 119, the Bredin code, that's maybe in international codes, and maybe will help you maybe sometimes in your maybe description. Let's maybe in you maybe work in the seismic. Okay, in your maybe description, you have to mention, I read the project. Then I selected maybe the shearing wall to assist maybe the lateral forces. according to the UBC 97 or according to the ACI 2019, blah, 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 and why you select maybe the shearing force. This is item one. Number two, when you come to maybe for shearing or reinforcement, you have to mention here in your selection as maybe you know, maybe you can use as maybe two hidden columns in the first or the end, or as maybe contribution rebars across the maybe the shearing wall. With the software you use, maybe you can use ETABS, you can use SAFE, or you can use SAB. If you mention for ETABS and SAB, that's very good, because already include the Canadian standard and the recent version of the National Building Code 2015. It's already included in this kind of software. And then you, when you come to maybe the sketches, and you said I prepare the sketches according to the maybe local, maybe towns, local municipalities, or blah 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 blah. Always my responsibility. I did. I figure out. This is maybe kind of maybe solution. You have to do that. You can use the same project to answer more than one assessment. It's not necessary to, but in this project, maybe you have more than one responsibility, and then you can balance between the job. Let's maybe now see another example here. Here maybe solution techniques, be able to understand solution technique and identify, verify results. Okay, and let me show you maybe something complicated a little bit here. 1 second. Building. Okay. Now. Okay. Okay, now for this assessment, now in 1.4 here, application of theories, apply engineering knowledge to design solution. Okay, now with this situation, always brief description about the situation here. A client hired my employer to build 2 stories above an existing building. It is a structural element, consists of stone walls without any longitudinal or horizontal reinforcement steel. This is an old building. It's maybe installed in 1960 or 1970. It's old building from stone without any rebars. The wall thickness was 16 inches. My role was to deviate a design to build concrete elements above stone walls. Here. Now, see what I started. I inspected the vertical wall dimensions, 16 inches external, internal, and height, to make sure there weren't cracks resulting from differential landing of foundation. This may be for the settlement. I verified the wall foundation thickness and steel reinforcement to ensure their adequacy to carry additional loads. I decided, see, always I decided, I inspected, I verified. Always show yourself. Don't be general. I decide to increase the width of the wall foundation and to add a new steel reinforcement. Consequently, I had a new design foundation. Honestly, when I wrote this assessment and when I try to submit, then in the form I have no more than 1,000 words or maybe 1,100 words. Then I write everything, and then after that try to adjustment, to delete something, shrink something, but at least the reader have to understand the idea. Now, my design here, my design depended on creating a vertical stiffness concrete element the same as the stiffness of stone. So I calculated the wall's moment of inertia, which allowed me to design a deep concrete beam above the wall with dimension 16 inches by 36. I tied the existing wall to the proposed beam with dowels diameter 16 millimeter. I fixed the dowels 8 inches inside the wall by using epoxy. And we know all, and that's general, we use, most engineer can do that. And the joint between the existing walls and proposed beam must be solid enough to resist vertical load, which may cause a punch, shearing, and bending moment forces. I use the broken software here, broken software, to meet this need as per British code BS 5110. This is kind of assessment when I arrived to Canada as a newcomer, okay? See, and here I mentioned for me a known code. It is maybe very, very known code, because in Canada or USA, if you say I maybe have maybe local codes like Indian, Syrian, Iraq, Egypt, Malaysian, most of this code came from the American code, but it is maybe not well known here. But to maybe to ignore any maybe potential interviews or more maybe technical exams, maybe I prefer in your assessment use something internationally known, such as the American, the Britain, the Europe code. Okay, I installed the new column above the proposed beam. With the design, the construction became very simple: column, roofs, and block walls. I use the theories of stiffness of material to combine between the stone and reinforcement concrete. I submitted my calculation to the consult engineer committee in our city to review my design. See what I did here? Always in maybe very short, descriptive, and the reader have to understand your drawing. That's very, very, very important. This is the general idea, the main topics, the first 10 assessment about your understanding for the role, for the standard, how to use it. And this is the same sequences, okay? In other hand, they maybe ask you about to show your ability about the communications, oral, verbal. When you write, you can use the same job, the same project here to answer for the same question. Always remember, you have to mention in your assessment, when you contact with the client, I used simple language. I use very simple words, not complicated. I don't speak fast, blah, blah, blah. And I was very descriptive, because your client is not a technical. Maybe he can't understand what you are speaking. Maybe your manager here in Canada, a lot, maybe also your manager is not technical sometimes. That maybe happen a lot. And you have also used simple word, simple description to explain the idea. And also when you mentioned, when I prepare my structural sketches, very easy to read, descriptive, blah, 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 same sequences. And this is in general. Also, they will ask you how you deal with the environment. This is very important in the competency assessment to answer for this question. Always you use maybe some kind of maybe friend solution for the environment, okay, to maybe to prevent potential maybe pollution, kind of that. For example, here in Canada, and especially in Alberta, we have a problem in the radon gas, or radon, it's maybe kind of toxic gas. It may be the high range in Alberta, and that maybe leads to cancer. And for most building, you have maybe to think about the area of the building. So maybe you can add maybe a sunbed underneath the slab on grade, and you have maybe pipe and vent, that maybe to protect your building from this maybe toxic gas that can lead for the cancer. This is one kind of the solution. Also, for the environment, what kind of solution you can use it maybe for to be friend with the environment? Let's imagine you are not in Canada and you are writing your competency assessment. You have a block you know, maybe out, maybe especially in the most Asian countries, maybe depends on the concrete and regular block. Okay, for the insulation and kind of that, if you use the HVAC maybe system, and that maybe with maybe diffuser come in and out, that maybe can help to maybe save the energy, and maybe that more friendly for the environment. Also, if you maybe preparing maybe drawing or studying for the infrastructures for the maybe chilled water, that means chilled water in some caused water or pipes used for drinking, it's called chilled water. Or if you can maybe for the sewage or drainage, if you have a restaurant, if you have, then when you design the manhole and the pipe, also you have to mention, I maybe design maybe a room to separate the fats or maybe solid fats from the regular maybe waste, and then throw out, and then the rest water should be filterizing, or maybe pass through maybe 3 filters, and then we can use it maybe for watering the planets or kind of that. Then you have now a kind of solution friendly for the environment. In general, let me summarize everything again. Always mention about yourself. I, my role, I did, I concluded. Always I. And secondly, be very specific. Don't be general. I use the code according to the item or according to the subsection, blah, 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 blah. What the kind of software you use it? Okay. What the theory you use it to solve? Okay. Always direct, descriptive, and the results of your solution. It's good in your competency assessment if you can attach some drawing, that's good, but not all of them, maybe just you need 1 or 2. And in case sometimes you see for some drawings you are not confident with it, don't share it. Okay, this is my general tips for you. If you follow this rule, you don't need any interview. When I submitted, this is my assessment, as same as you said here, as you show here, then I completely passed the competency assessment, and then I get my license as a professional engineer. This is my recommendation for you in general. Maybe as a newcomer, if you follow this rule, maybe you will refer you for just 1 interview, and just to double check with you some questions, some assessment, and then they can license you directly as an engineer in training. And that may be normal for all associations. But the most important thing after that, when you submit the competency assessment for the second time, because when you be engineer in training, you have to be for 1 year as engineer in training. And after that, you have to resubmit your competency assessment after 1 year of Canadian experience. And you have to follow this rule exactly. If you do same what I did here, I didn't, I passed directly, I get my license, and no any scheduled interview and no any technical exams. That's what I want to share with you in this presentation. If you have any question, I can answer you now.
Okay, thank you, Khalid, for sharing your knowledge and experience. So we're going to move on to questions and answers. We have 10 minutes left. So let's do 1 question per person. So I first do, Olu has a question in the chat. Can you use 1 project for 1 to 1.10? Khalid,
yes, you can use 1 project from 1 to 10, but don't copy paste the same answers. You have maybe to tailor it according to the job. For example, in this job, maybe you were maybe designer, or you may be also inspector. Okay, maybe I can use, maybe I use for this job, I answer this job as a designer, I answer the job as maybe inspector. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Actually, yeah, I would have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Khalid. I was wondering, you mentioned, I don't know if I heard it correctly, like an appendix and the attachments and stuff. Do you add your sketches and drawings and stuff like this, like in the appendix? Did I understand that correctly?
Okay. I add some attachments because they allow you to add 5 or 6 attachments. It depends on the job. But my recommendation, when you write your assessment, try to maybe cover everything in your description. Because remember, those reviewers just volunteers. And I don't know if they have a time to open your maybe sketches or kind of that. It's good to add attachment, but try to focus in your description.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next, Karim. Karim, go ahead.
Hello, hi, good evening. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's quite educative. My question goes towards, for most of us who have non-Canadian experience and are validators whom we work together out of Canada, what do we, because I know for APEGA, it will ask you to fill in your validator's current position and the company where you add the experience from. So for me, for some of my validators, they've left my previous workplace. So what do I do in that scenario?
Okay. This question is very maybe simple. Okay. Logically, when you arrive as a newcomer to Canada, you don't have any Canadian validator. You have to add something overseas from your country or the country you worked before. And the reference or the validator, so maybe you can your supervisor, your colleague in the work, your friends in the work, any kind of reference you can add it. It's not a big deal.
Yes, I know you can use everyone. What I'm talking about is that these validators, what if they no longer work where you guys worked together out of Canada? So maybe
you have to maybe before assigning your validator, you have to contact with them and to discuss with them everything before submitting because what the process, when you submit the name of validator, they will receive an email from APEGA for verification. You have to be maybe before that to be in contact with them. Okay.
Yes, I know, but also the position of the validator. Do you feel in the position the validator was at when you worked together, or the validator's current position after you left, after you guys stopped working together?
For the validator, you need the validator twice. Once when you submit your first application,
okay,
this is maybe before, this is you can from your country, but after the first application, when you get your EIT and you will start working and be registered as engineer in training, okay, after that you need Canadian references for that. You have to find something in Canada, and not necessarily in same your province. Maybe you can with other province. It's not a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Always remember, for the assessment, you can use the same project to answer more than one questions. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bredin, go ahead.
Yeah. This is a nice presentation. Actually, it's very useful and very informative information. So my question is, I had 18 years experience, work experience, and 14 years in Dubai and 3 years in Bangladesh, as well as 8-month work experience is going in Canada. And my question is, I am eligible to apply for the PINs in APEGA? Or I have to wait to complete
let me
1
tell
year?
you something. For APEGA, you have to follow their procedures. You have to send your application online, and you have to wait for the assessment. I think you will receive the result maybe in 10 months until 1 year. This is the procedure in APEGA. And it depends on my, I know APEGA always request for the newcomers to have maybe the fundamental engineering exam. Okay, they maybe if you took the fundamental FE exam, that's for the academic assessment. Maybe in other provinces don't request for that, but in APEGA, this is one I know that before. You have to email APEGA. Maybe they're all changed from 3 years when I applied. I don't know, but I think still APEGA request for the newcomer for the fundamental engineering exam, or if they maybe when do your academic assessment, maybe they accept your university, your program. It depends from country to country and from assessment to assessment. And always, I think for as immigrant to Canada, you have maybe to have a report from WES for your academic assessment, or ICAS, or any kind of organization maybe certified by the Canadian Immigration Ministry. I can't answer this question accurately. You have to contact APEGA.
But I can apply directly for FEENS or EIT?
Again, before apply, if you have to apply to as an EIT or as BEng, you have to contact APEGA. Even though if you start application as a BEng, because you have more than 4 years, okay, of engineering, if you have more than 4 years as engineering experience, you can apply directly for the BEng. But one of those years supposed to be Canadian experience. One of those, at least, you need 4 years. One of them supposed to be Canadian experience. So you have maybe to apply, and then after the assessment, they maybe register you as an EIT, or they maybe ask you to take some technical exams to register as an EIT or directly. Again, each applicant separate cases, because most of us came from different universities. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. So we have Pranjal throw a question in the chat. For environmental safety, can we provide examples of using a weather protection or any special sealing specifically used during design? Any
for sure, yeah, that's
Khalid?
very good questions for the weather. And yes, when you use maybe for the insulations, and what kind of insulation you use it, and what kind of building, the area, yeah, that's very good. And this is, you can use this assessment for understanding of the safety and also for the environment. Yeah, you can use it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Zubair, go ahead. And that's going to be the last question for this session. Zubair, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, Khalid. The one question regarding how, because we have the international experience and our degree not from Canada. So how we can avoid FE exam? Is there any way or in the application? Because I check with the many people. Some people, they said everything depend on your application. They decide on your application, how your application efficient, then they will decide to go for FE exam or not. So what is your suggestion
for that? Okay, again, in your application, try to be very specific and mention for the standards modes, the international standards, show your understanding for the theories. And after that, maybe depends, in my opinion, a little bit depends on the luck and who that can be reviewers for your applications. And then we can decide if you need the technical exam or not. And also there is maybe a bylaw for APEGA. We can work in this range. They can't exceed it. And depends on my experience. Maybe I can tell you something else. When I arrived in Canada, I started 2 applications. I have application with APEGA, and also I start another application with BC altogether. With BC, when I submitted my application, they didn't request any kind of technical exam. You know that? And I still work in Alberta and using Alberta building code. And in BC, they didn't ask me for any kind of technical exams. But in APEGA, or maybe Saskatchewan, or maybe Manitoba, they request maybe the fundamental engineering exam for some newcomers, maybe some, especially for the maybe the immigrant came from the Middle East. I don't know if they may be same for maybe come from Mexico, from maybe Africa, or from Philippines or India, Bangladesh, I'm not sure. But for these countries, yes, I know some provinces requested the fundamental engineering exam. And remember, if you are engineer in training in provinces, that's not necessary to be engineer in training with another provinces, with others. However, if you are a professional engineer from any provinces, there is a mobility agreement across Canada, and then you can transfer your registration. In your assessment, in your application, always try to use the short and the direct lines to get your license. But very important to show, to involve in Canadian experience, even though if something you can't find a job, try to be as a volunteer, try to contact the recruiter over the LinkedIn. Try also to write a Canadian resume, and maybe you can, maybe she is experienced and helped me before in my resume. And also, if you can't find any job, maybe there is some organization or engineering organization presentation with APEGA, try to always involve or to share or to participate. That will maybe consider for you as a Canadian experience as well. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you.
You are very welcome, and best of luck. And maybe it is maybe short presentation, because the subject is maybe need more than 3 to 4 sessions. It's very, but hopefully I give you a brief description. Maybe I'll share with Yoko maybe some examples from each one. I'll maybe send to her maybe 3 to 4 assessment with you. You can use it as a guide for your assessment. For that, no worries.
Okay, thank you so much, Khalid, today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Sorry, we didn't have enough time to answer everybody's questions, but if you have any questions, I can collect everybody's questions and send them to Khalid. Yeah. So
maybe next month we can make another session. No worries.
Yeah.
But sorry, my time is very tight.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna end here today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions to Khalid. Okay. Well, thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Bye. Take care. Bye.